A game system is nothing without its adventures. It's just a bunch of dry rules. A good adventure brings a game system to life. A good adventure shows people the way, both how to run the game, and if you're a player, how to thrive, how to survive. A good adventure will create a vibe. It'll show the experience of what gameplay is and what you can expect. Now, when the Quick Start Guide for Shadowdark came out, the Game Master version included a free adventure called the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur. And this has gone on to become like the iconic Shadowdark adventure. Today, we're going to talk about why that is and why it needs to be on your gaming bucket list. What do I mean by a bucket list? Because it's a little bit of a dark subject, right? The term, the bucket list, came from kicking the bucket, and people have said, so I think it's probably an American term, having a bucket list, or like, what are those things you want to do while you're still on this world? For many of us, or for many people, that includes travel. Like, I want to go to Hawaii or see the Grand Canyon or make it to Europe and see those things I've always wanted to see, like the Colosseum or the Eiffel Tower. From a nerd perspective, I think it can include things like gaming achievements. That's certainly how I approach it. So I have a gaming bucket list. As a referee or a game master, what are adventures I want to make sure I run before I stopped playing or before I hang up my dice or quit the RPG hobby or something like that? So I want to lead a group of players into the Vault of the Drow at some point. We've already been to the tops of Castle Ravenloft, but I still want to, as a modern gamer, have a group take a longboat to the shore of the Isle of Dread and feel the hot sand beneath their boots and the roar of a dinosaur, out there in the jungle. And there are all these adventures in D&D history that have become legendary, either because they transport us to some like wildly imaginative place, and so players are drawn to them, or in some case, they're just so challenging that being able to say you overcame that adventure or you got that object or that item becomes like an achievement in its own right. And the adventures have passed into legend. The stories about them have propagated, and they become destinations for future gamers. So I have a bucket list. I'm going to walk you through, like, by the editions, what I see as those iconic adventures. In the BX period, for me, this is what they are. Like, I still haven't had a group completely finish Castle Amber. Would love to get back to that one. Many of these others we've certainly played, and I'm queuing one of my Shadowdark campaigns for the Isle of Dread. AD&D, and even second edition here, like Night Below. There are a ton of them. Now, and many of these in AD&D are higher level. They're very challenging, things like the Tomb of Horrors or Against the Giants or Vault of the Drow. And there's a bunch on this slide that I want to see. I want to see myself translate them to Shadowdark and maybe play them in a future year. I think it starts to thin out a little bit when we get to the WotC editions, but there still have been some really well-regarded adventures. Keep on the Shadowfell might have been the most well-known. I actually think Thunderspire Labyrinth for 4th edition was a much better adventure, and I could see myself returning to that one someday. The OSR is a different beast. If you think about what's been published the past 15 years, there's thousands and thousands of adventures, but it's such a fragmented market. So which ones have gotten kind of like enough escape velocity that people talk about them a lot? This is just a representation. I'm sure, like, in the comments, you'll let me know if there's something iconic that I've missed. But these are a handful of what I see as the most influential or iconic OSR type adventures. And of course, the question behind this video is, why do I see the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur joining this esteemed society of OSR adventures that are somewhat iconic? Well, for me, let's step back and think about reach and distribution a little bit, and sales, because one barometer is the distribution or the penetration an adventure has is certainly a sign point or a data point that we should consider. Back in the 1980s, Keep on the Borderlands, that most iconic of adventures, sold 1.5 million copies. In our modern fallen age, Lost Mine of Phandelver, for instance, I think sold a few 100,000. And when you look at those OSR titles, and many of them are really well known in our niche, in our part of the RPG world, they're sitting between like 2,500 and 5,000 copies over on DriveThruRPG. Now, I know that that's not the end all and be all, because some of these adventures have had Kickstarters, or like Goodman Games, Sailors on the Starless Sea, like the iconic DCC adventure. They probably sell that at every convention in hard copy. So the PDF doesn't come anywhere close to representing what the real sales are, but it is a data point. And obviously the OSR is a much smaller market. Now, let's think about Shadowdark. I think it was about a year ago when Kelsey was being interviewed, the proprietor of the Arcane Library, someone asked her, hey, how many people have actually downloaded those quick start guides in order to play Shadowdark? And at the time, and this was about a year ago, she said, I think there's been 50,000 downloads or so. Like 50,000 copies of the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur sitting on people's hard drives to play. And the fact that it's a free adventure really is a brilliant strategy in terms of getting it out there. Because every single time someone surfaces on social media, whether it's Facebook, Reddit, here on the YouTube, and says, hey, I'm interested in this game and I want to do something with my group. What do you recommend I play? And the stack answer always is, unless it's a gauntlet, in which case it's Trial of the Slime Lord as one of the recommendations. But if it's an adventure for first level people, they're like, why don't you just do Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur? It's free, and it came in the Quick Start Guide for Gamemasters, and it's got everything you need. So this adventure is accumulating like a large number of followers and comments and stories online, and it just keeps accumulating. I think I did a cursory search on Reddit, and there was something like 3 or 4 dozen different threads of people sharing their experiences, and then tons and tons of comments of people, again, sharing their experiences trying to defeat the Scarlet Minotaur. And if you think about Shadowdark's growth trajectory a little bit, 2 or 3 years ago, you could say, oh, this game's like an interesting fantasy heartbreaker. But it really captured a spirit of people getting tired with modern D&D and 5e and wanting to enter an OSR type space. And then it blew up at Gen Con. I say that's the moment it achieved escape velocity, and then had this phenomenal Kickstarter last year, the Western Reaches. And as we turn the calendar into 2026, looking ahead, they've got employees now, they've got distribution, they're landing distribution in Europe. We're seeing translations in European languages. It's already out in French, and my understanding is that German, Italian, and Spanish are right around the corner. Shadowdark, or the Arcane Library, will be launching their own organized play a little later this year. They've already got the backing of Lurking Fears, an organized play group that attends all the major Midwest conventions. So it's quickly differentiating itself from kind of a small self-publisher and making those evolutionary steps into being like an ongoing publisher. And so more and more people over time are going to keep getting that free quick start guide, and their first foray into Shadowdark gameplay is going to be sending a group of hapless people into the Lost Citadel to be hunted by the horrible Scarlet Minotaur. And during the Western Reaches, in fact, one of the stretch goals for people that were getting the physical books was to get a hardcover version, like a standalone hardcover premium version of the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur as one of those freebie stretch goals. And what lessons do people learn from making this their first adventure? First, I would say that it takes a certain amount of bravery to say that the first adventure I want people to experience is horribly deadly, where your first level party with players that don't know OSR gameplay and a referee that's new to OSR gameplay is going to have the players go into a dungeon where they're hunted on the first level by this 7th level, indomitable, relentless, possibly immortal Minotaur. On top of that, one of the principal factions on the first level of the Citadel are the Ettercaps. Now, the Ettercaps are level 3 monsters, so they're basically bugbears. And if you use that to anchor your thoughts, you know that in most old school adventures, like TSR stuff, bugbears would be like second level, third level monsters in the dungeon. They're not something you run into in the second room of the dungeon. But that's not all. Like the Ettercaps, they've got these freaky little mandibles. They're spider people. They're crawling on the ceiling. They shoot webs. They're poisonous. They're like bugbears on steroids. And that's the group you're going to run into like in the second room of the Citadel. Like there's no coddling of players in this particular adventure. And so there's certain lessons the group, both on the referee side and the player side, they have to learn if your campaign is going to be successful. As a referee or a DM, you have to learn how to telegraph danger effectively. You have to recognize that players are not going to solve things just through let's roll initiative, that you have to leverage those morale rolls, those reaction checks, and you have to foster an environment where players can try to solve problems creatively, because combat is clearly not the answer to successfully negotiating the Lost Citadel. And on the player side, it's the same. One, you're not going to solve all your problems by saying, let's roll initiative. If the referee is laying down danger signals, players have to learn how to read those signals and understand what's going on and create strategies and tactics beyond what's on their character sheet in order to try to survive. So in this way, the Lost Citadel is a phenomenal proving ground for both new referees and new players to the OSR, or at least to the Shadowdark game experience. And this is why it's starting to get this reputation as the iconic Shadowdark adventure that if you haven't played it yet, you need to put this one on your bucket list. Now, let me tell you how I really got off on talking about this. And actually, before I say that, if you made it this far, you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing. It really helps my channel. Someone in a comment had said, I'm still not clear on how Shadowdark experience works. Would you be willing to do a more detailed example, maybe a video that would be like a workshop, stepping through how to do experience? And I was like, that's a great idea for a video. And the light bulb went off. I said, of course, it's got to be the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur, because that's the adventure that every referee has and has access to. So we can go through it together. So that's what got me thinking about the Lost Citadel and just the iconic nature of it and why it needs to be on all of our bucket lists. But I'm going to Page next weekend. It's the Philly Area Gaming Expo. And so I don't have a ton of time this week. I want to just do a short video. So I'm going to praise or extol the virtues of the Scarlet Minotaur. And when I return to uploading in a couple weeks after the convention, I promise you we'll take a look at experience. We'll dive into how to score the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur and how the Shadowdark experience system works. All right, thanks for being here. See everyone in a couple weeks. If you happen to be at Page, I'll be running games. I'll be playing some games. If you recognize me from YouTube, come up and say hi. That'd be awesome. All right, happy gaming, everyone.